I landed in hospital diagnosed with severe burnout and exhaustion. And the doctors basically said that my body had thrown my brain a hand grenade and the way I was working was completely unsustainable. So I'm going to share with you the exact mindset shift that I took to help me focus on what really matters when it comes to scaling a business. And spoiler alert, it isn't focusing on revenue or cash, because I've done that and it didn't end well. So to give you a bit of background, I've worked for myself for nearly 8 years now, and after 3.5 years of freelancing as a digital marketer, I switched and decided to scale up to a digital agency and kind of a freelancer network. And everything looked like it was going brilliantly. Revenue was growing, clients were growing, it was really full on, but seemed to be going in the right direction. Until it really wasn't. On the 21st of December 2021, I landed in hospital diagnosed with severe burnout and exhaustion, something that I didn't know could even be a real diagnosis at the time. And the doctors basically said that my body had thrown my brain a hand grenade and the way I was working was completely unsustainable. I had no choice. I had to flip the way that I worked and the way I operated, or lose my own business and be very, very unwell. So what did I actually do to flip that mindset and still see a successful business at the end of it? So there are 3 things that I did to help shift my mindset. And the first one was asking for help. This was a really big change, and admitting I needed help was not in the form of like more staff or employees, but it was mental health help and personal help. That is not something I have ever asked for before in my entire life. And as someone who's quite a proud person and someone who loves their work and their work is their identity, asking for personal mental health felt very vulnerable and very difficult. But when I say it was the best decision I think I've ever made when it comes to business, I really, really mean it. So I swallowed my pride, started seeing a therapist, and actually worked with a counsellor on CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, to help with things like anxiety and stress management. And honestly, learning to train my brain as a muscle was an absolute game changer. And it's now very much a non-negotiable part of my daily practice because it's so important, especially if you're a freelancer or a solo founder like me. So I don't have co-founders or employees to offload to, so it really is all on me. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what asking for help actually looks like in terms of personal development and what it really looked like for me, because it wasn't just about the therapy. For instance, I started really basic, like really, really basic, with just half an hour walk every single day before work outside. Because when you're feeling really rubbish anyway, your base level of expectation for yourself becomes so much lower than what you're used to. So it makes sense to really, really go back to basics and start with what you can change immediately. And that for me was getting outside in the morning and moving. It's amazing how much clarity you can get from a simple bit of fresh air. And another bit of shift, or another really big shift for me, was starting to track my alcohol intake. Because for me, with a busy brain, alcohol has been the only way that I've found that has really helped me switch off. And unfortunately, over the years, my intake had steadily got more and more and more, and my ability to switch off was getting harder and harder and harder because I needed more alcohol to be able to do that. So I started tracking my intake daily. It was terrifying. It was very, very terrifying, to the point where I realised I'm just not the type of person who can moderate. So on the 5th of January 2024, I quit drinking completely. And I'm now nearly 2 years sober, and cutting out the booze was like taking a massive weight off my shoulders. And it didn't just fit with my kind of bigger dream of running a successful business, but it's also made a huge difference to my mental clarity, because hangovers, especially for someone who's nearly 40 like me, last a long time. And they cause insane amounts of brain fog, but they also cloud your ability to set your own objectives and see your work for what it is. So for anyone who's watching this, I'd say start with the basics of lifestyle changes. I know it sounds really basic, but it's so important. Just getting a bit mindful, starting really small with daily walks, reaching out to people for help for mental well-being, and really focusing on your body. Like, track your lifestyle. And if you're seeing dangerous trends, you're going to have to make a call and make a big difference, because these things are the foundation of being able to run a business without burning out. So the second thing I did was become a student of my trade. I heard this term a few years ago and it has cemented in my brain. It's one thing having the dream of running a business, but to know what it actually takes is like a whole different kettle of fish. And if you've never done it before, like myself, it is even bigger than you can ever imagine. So where did I start? Well, I actually literally just started reaching out to people who are further along the journey than I am. I listened to endless podcasts and I got really picky about the advice that I took and from who. And what I mean by that is, if someone is forming an opinion on what you're doing, but they have not achieved it themselves, or they are not a potential customer, already an existing customer, then their opinion is pretty irrelevant. Really hunker down and shut out the noise from people who are irrelevant and have irrelevant opinions because they haven't achieved what you're on the path to achieve. I used to be a real sucker for negativity, and the second someone was saying the market was hard, or how hard it is to run a business, or how difficult the market is, etc., I would absorb that a lot a few years ago. However, now that I've taken that shift to really understand that it's only people who are ahead of me on the journey that I'm trying to take myself are the only ones who have any real valid input into my day-to-day business. So I reached out to people who were ahead of the game, who had already built and sold digital agencies, who had already managed their own teams and were already much further down the line than me. And it's incredible how much kindness I was met with from people in our industry. It can feel really daunting to reach out to your industry idols. And I fangirl a lot with people in my industry. I really do. CEOs of, agencies gone by, and business podcasters and whoever else that I find real inspiration from, they are my Brad Pitts or my, Hollywood actors. Those are the kind of guys that I really idolize, the ones who are ahead of me on the journey that I'm trying to navigate myself. So when you reach out to them, it can feel really daunting. However, the worst thing that can happen is they ghost you. The best thing that can happen is they'll spend some time with you. And I have been very fortunate to spend some time and chat to people who are ahead of the game. And when I say they have been the most valuable 30 minutes that I've had with those individuals in my career to date, I would be underselling it, because I still, to this day, implement certain things that I've picked up from those conversations, from those people that truly matter on my journey. Now that I understand the power of learning, I've just factored it into my day-to-day. And one thing that I've learned from working with mentors and professionals is that learning and development should just be factored into any business owner's day-to-day, because you should treat yourself like a business. Businesses have their own research and development departments, so individual business owners should factor that into the day-to-day too. Because one thing it especially helps with is taking action thoughtfully as opposed to full of risk, and something that you might do if you're taking advice from everybody under the sun and your mum, as opposed to people who've been there and done that. I've also joined a community of other digital agency owners, which has been so refreshing, because everybody leaves competition at the door and everybody's there as a peer as opposed to a competitor. So you can share good news, bad news, tricky news, challenges, etc. And everybody helps each other and chips in. And it's amazing to be able to hear other people's opinions of the same kind of thing that you're going through. Instead of investing in employees, I've invested in working with a business mentor and also a therapist to help me instead. And what those two people bring me is A, the ability to verbalize where I'm at, and B, an outside perspective that I can't get from myself. My mentor, and I chose him specifically because he's already achieved what I'm trying to achieve. And the therapist that I work with, I've chosen because she gives practical steps as to how to help with my mental health and my stress management on a day-to-day basis. Those two people combined, for me personally, have enabled me to get so much more out of myself before I even think about bringing more people into my business. So partnering with those professionals and joining the community of like-minded individuals has helped remind me that I'm very much not alone in this. and that I've never been behind. I just needed to keep learning and iterating. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all of the stuff, you should know, in inverted commas, just remember that the learning is a big part of this process. I know that very, very well. And remember, you don't have to know it all. You just have to keep getting there a little bit better week after week. And the third and final thing I did was just become an observer. And I know that sounds mega vague, but stick with me because it is one of the most practical shifts that I have ever made. And what I mean by observer is I started to look at what was already working within the business. So what clients did we already have, and what did they look like? What trends were in amongst them? What sizes were they? How many employees did they have? What kind of revenue did they do themselves? What industries did they work in? Which ones were profitable, which were not? And what I found really helpful was to create dashboards within my project management system, monday.com, which is brilliant. And that helped me quickly establish these trends within clients so that when I actually started focusing on sales again, I knew who I would be targeting and why I'd be targeting, because I already had the data to hand, because I knew they were the right kind of clients for us. I also forensically started to chat to our freelancers. I'd already met them all before because part of our network is that I vet every single freelancer that works with us. However, this time was different. I delved more into what makes them tick, what briefs do they like, what don't they like, what do they really not like about working with digital agencies, what do they really enjoy about working with digital agencies, and started to pull apart trends again so that when we're looking for more freelancers to work for us, we know exactly the type of people that we work really well with. Over time, those two exercises became an absolute goldmine of ideas, and it helped me to understand what position to push the business in. So the more I observed, the more confident I became in shaping the businesses in the areas that actually work as opposed to the areas that don't. So if you're feeling like you don't know what your next move is going to be, then try and zoom out and look at what is already working for your business, because the answers might already be in front of you. You just need to notice them. When you focus solely on making money and revenue, you start to lose sight of why you're doing it, and your passion, your creativity, your drive all dries up and gets replaced with stress and anxiety. And I know this feeling really, really well. And it wasn't until my health was on the line that I had to take that helicopter view of what was happening with myself and the business in order for it to thrive. And guess what? When I did these 3 actions, the business doubled from year 1 to year 2. And now, 3.5 years later, the business is doing 4.5 times the revenue it did in year 1. And that is because I stopped focusing on cash. I started focusing on myself, and I started to understand what it truly takes to run a successful business. So if this video helped and you really like this kind of content, then I would suggest you take a look at this other video that we've done around how to operate like a business as a solo founder or a freelancer, and check back in weekly for fresh content updates.